This is a review of how to write the contract. We are going to use as this template. This is Montgomery County, and this is going to be the MAR contract. I'll create another version with the GCAR regional contract version. The only difference between those two is going to be the actual sales contract itself. There's an MAR version, there's a GCAR version. The Montgomery County jurisdictional addendum has a GCAR version and an MAR version as well. There is also a form here, first-time buyer addendum, that only goes with the MAR. You do not have to do that with the GCAR version because that is the first-time buyer split of the transfer and recordation fees is worked out in the GCAR forms. Okay, so the first set of documents that has to be signed by the buyer is going to be the some disclosures. So here's how I'd be talking to you as I were talking to a buyer. So I would say something like this. Okay, let's just use John Doe. Okay, John, so first thing we have to do is we're going to go through some disclosures that you have to sign before we actually get to the paperwork. This first one here is called some information relative to the purchase of real estate. And off script for a second here, we're not attorneys. We don't tell them word for word what this thing means. We're giving them our sort of synopsis of it. If they have any questions regarding specifics of these things, always send them to an attorney. They're the ones who wrote these contracts. These are boilerplate. Okay, so back on. Okay, John. So first thing here, legal requirements. So in Maryland, there's a statute in Maryland that says contracts, in order for them to be enforceable, have to be in writing. There's two versions of them. There's a state contract and a regional contract. In this case, we're just going to use the state contract. There is a disclosure that you're going to sign, or sidebar, if you've already taken them out to see homes, they should have signed this already. Um, that so back on, there's a couple of documents that you're going to sign that are going to describe the different types of agents: buyer agent, seller agent, dual agent. Those are disclosures. I'll go over that with you and we'll sign those. Fair housing, any homes that we look at have to be in compliance with fair housing laws. If you guys are going to do anything with your property that's sort of out of the ordinary, you want to check with the county and the state and make sure you're not violating anything. Property taxes, just be aware, when you buy a home, the seller is going to provide us with a copy of the tax bill. Just be aware that it may increase. You do have a right to appeal, and that'll be explained in the contract. The sellers also have to give us a statement disclosing future property taxes, and those are going to be in the seller disclosures, which I'll go over with you as well. You do have a right to get a home inspection, and you can read through this, and it tells you everything that you're allowed to inspect for. Tenant rights, this only is valid in DC and Tacoma Park, so since we're not writing on any of those, don't worry about it. Unless you're in Tacoma Park, then you have to go through this. It has right of first refusal with tenants, but since unless you're licensed in DC and unless you're doing this in Tacoma Park, don't worry about that. Financing, you guys have a right to select your own lender. We have lenders that we can recommend to you. Ultimately, it's your choice. If you guys want a home warranty, I can help you with that. We can talk about that as we go through the contract. You're going to need to get homeowners insurance when you buy a home. So just be aware that home insurance rates, when you go to get rates, it has nothing to do with you. The rates for the homeowners insurance have to do with the number of claims and inquiries on the policy. So for example, if we're looking to buy a home and somebody had a flooded basement and there's a $30,000 homeowner insurance claim because they had to fix it, that's going to affect the rate. Criminal activity as agents, we are not allowed to tell you good neighborhood, bad neighborhood, safe neighborhood, not safe neighborhood. You have to do the research on your own. There's websites that'll do that. Paragraph 12, HOA condo disclosures. We will have, if we buy a home in an HOA or condo association, the sellers have to provide us with the full resale package, which shows all the information relating to these associations. If it's a homeowner association, you have 5 days to review the documents. If it's a condo, we have 7 days to review it. And with both of those, if there's anything in there that you guys don't like, we can walk away from the deal. This says that in the state of Maryland, we're going to get, in Montgomery County, we're going to get the what's called a property disclosure statement from the seller. It's a questionnaire of everything that they know that's going on with the property. It could be, structural, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, HVAC, all that stuff. They do have the option to do what's called a disclaimer, meaning that, claiming we don't know anything, buyer beware, your home inspector, it's up to him to find everything. And we'll see that a lot when it comes to somebody selling a property that's been rented and an estate sale where somebody, if somebody hasn't lived in the property, we're going to see that quite a bit. Vacant property registration, don't worry about that. That's DC. Transfer and recordation fees in the state of Maryland and in Montgomery County. Anytime you buy a home and sell a home, there are state transfer and recordation fees. They're somewhere in the neighborhood of 2.2%, and they're split equally between buyer and seller. So just be aware that as a buyer, you pay for half, seller pays for half. If you are a first-time buyer, you will get a savings of 0.25% off of these fees, and that'll get credited to you at settlement. And then there's also a government regulation disclosure that we're going to get from the seller, and it just, again, we'll get to it, and I'll explain that to you in more detail. Just understand you have a right to get that disclosure. Okay, so sidebar for a second. This document here, understanding who agents represent and consent for dual agency, these are supposed to be signed on the first face-to-face meeting. So I'm going to assume that they've been signed if you've already met them. If this is the first time you've met them, and we're sitting down with them and you're going over all this stuff with them, then this is how I would explain it. And if you are going out to see homes with them, you can explain this to them the same way when you're out seeing homes. Okay, so all right, John. So there's a couple of disclosures here that state of Maryland mandates that we have signed before we start showing homes. This is called the understanding who real estate agents represent. You see in huge letters, this is not a contract. This is just informational purposes, identifying all the players in the game. So there's agents that represent the seller, and you can read, everything here, but just know that they represent the seller and the seller's best interest. There's agents that represent the buyer. That would be me. I represent you and your interest, and I have a fiduciary to you. And then there's something called dual agency. Dual agency means that both the buyer and the seller agent work for the same real estate company. So we go to look at a home, and that home is listed by Remax Town Center. I work for Remax Town Center. That's called dual agency. It does not affect my relationship with you individually. I still have a fiduciary to you. It's just putting you on notice that this is what's going on, and you can read further about that when you have a chance. We have another form called consent for dual agency that you will agree or not agree to doing that. But go ahead, you can read further here and see what this is dual agency entails. So of all those types of agents, I'm disclosing to you that I am your buyer's agent. Go ahead and sign there. If they do not want to sign it, you fill this bottom part out. But this does have to be presented. Consent for dual agency. Okay, John, this is consent for dual agency, and this again has to deal with us, me showing you homes listed by people in my office, and then ultimately buying. If you want to write on a property, it also discloses that as well. So read through this, but at the end of the day, if you want me to be able to show you homes that are listed by people in my office, then we've got to sign up here. If we actually get into a contract, then we'll go ahead and sign under here, but go ahead and sign up here for right now. Notification dual agency within a team. This is just like there's dual agency where both the buyer agent and the listing agent work in the same office. This is a situation where we do have a team, and I may wind up showing you listings that are listed by my team. So same sort of thing applies. I am still your agent. Just realize that Ken is the agent on our team who does the listings. If we see a listing on that's listed by him, this is just giving you guys a disclosure that might happen. Again, you guys have to be okay and give your consent. If you don't want to give your consent, that's fine too, but then I won't be able to show you those listings. So if you are okay with this, go ahead and sign here. This is buyer agency agreement. This discloses that our relationship. So first part here, this says what my responsibility is to you, and this says that I will use my all my skills and my expertise to find a property for you, get it under contract, take you through the whole process, inspection, appraisal, everything, to settlement. I will also be the intermediary between us and the seller, but I'll be talking to the listing agent. Your responsibility is you're going to work with exclusively with me. You're not going to be running around with 25 other agents. Also, if you go to an open house, if you go to new construction, or if you want to see a home and you see a sign in front of a home and you want to get in there, please call me first, because if you don't let me tell these people that you're coming or that you're interested in coming, they may not allow me to work for you. They may not honor the agency. How do I get paid? Um, so here's the way I get paid. We have here per MLS. What does that mean? Well, in Maryland, the listing agent pays all the commission. So whatever they're offering out in the multiple listing service as a commission, that is my commission. You don't pay my commission. There is a $3.95 broker admin fee here. That's what that is. It doesn't go to me. It goes to Remax Town Center for processing the contract from beginning to settlement. This is a 60-day protection period. It means that what it means is that you can't prevent you from going to see a home with me and then saying, "Hey Ken, you're fired," and then trying to cut a deal on this same house without me. C and D don't apply. Termination, this will expire on April 30th. If you want to get out of it, give me 7 days advance notice and then I'll terminate the deal. You can read through this. This is basically what I don't do. And it's like, it acknowledges that I'm not an accountant, an appraiser, an inspector, an engineer, blah, blah, blah. I am a real estate agent and that's all I do. This is legal stuff. You can read through that. These are the three addendum that I just had, or disclosures that I just had you sign. And then that's it. Go ahead and sign here and here, and we're good. Okay, so here's the contract of sale. And for sample purposes, I use this on a listing that I had in Silver Spring. All right, so let's go through the contract. So these are just the particulars of everybody involved. Here's the seller. Here's you guys. The address. Fee simple just means you don't have to pay any ground rent. You own the property and the land underneath it. In Baltimore, you have to actually rent the ground on some of these things. Here's the sale price. Here's the earnest money check, and I didn't fill this in, so let's just use an example. Let's say $2,000. Okay, so this talks about the earnest money check in $2,000. We're going to have Home First Title hold the earnest money. It's going to go into a non-interest bearing account. We always do that. Why? Because it costs more money to open an interest bearing account and maintain it than the interest you would ever make on this money for the short time it's going to sit there. Date of settlement is going to be February 8th. We're going to be using conventional loan. Go ahead and initial here and here. So just as an aside here, all the pages of the contract are going to need their initials at the bottom. Okay. So here's the financing application. Sorry, they backtrack here. They keep redoing this contract, and normally number 10 used to appear on the top of the page. Now it's here. So this says here that you're going to apply with a lender within 7 days, and odds are they've already done that. So if you've got a pre-approval letter, they've already done it. This didn't get filled in, but I usually, whatever the financing contingency is here. So this says you'll apply within 7 days, and this says we have 30 days to get a financing commitment from the lender, getting loan approval. And this is something that you'll iron out with the lender ahead of time of how quickly they can do this. Alternate financing, let's say your lender wakes up one day and goes, "Hey, sorry, we're out of business." It doesn't mean the deal's dead. You have alternate financing, which means you do have a right to go get another loan. We are going to do a home inspection, so go ahead and initial here. This is going to be copied off of the disclosure. So let's just say that this is what's copied. So we just say, okay, here's all the stuff that the seller says is included. Take a look at that and let me know if there's anything here that we missed, or any questions here. They also said they're going to leave the microwave. These two things do not apply. As a sidebar, they would if you guys are in an agricultural or forest conservation management area. In all the years I've been doing this, I have not hit on either one of these in Montgomery County, but this is a state contract. So yeah, we'll be up in Frederick or Washington County, you will hit this. But for Montgomery County, the odds are this isn't going to happen. So this talks about lead-based paint, and there's an A, B, and a C here. So we'll get into, I'll explain all that. Go ahead and initial here and here, and then I'll explain that. So have them initial. Okay, so this is A, B, and C are saying that we're going to get all these lead paint disclosures from the sellers, and they're going to address all three of these things here. So go ahead and initial here, here, and here, and here. All right. The seller has to let us know if there's something called a front foot benefit fee or any deferred water charges. And what that means is when there's new construction that's built, normally what the builder will do is they will bring in the water and the sewer. They'll defer that over 30 years, and every homeowner has to pay once a year this fee for 30 years. And that's called a front foot benefit fee or a deferred water and sewer assessment. So if the seller says that there's no fee and it turns out there is a fee, they're going to get nailed for it. Okay, so just go ahead and initial here. These are just different addendum that we're going to include with the contract. Okay, wood destroying insects. We are going to do a wood destroying insect report and inspection, and the inspector is going to look for termites, wood boring bees, and carpenter ants, anything that can destroy wood. If they are present or if there's damage present, we're going to have the seller fix it. They're going to be on the hook for that. This talks about the earnest money deposit. It says if it's going to be held by a broker. In our case, it is not held by a broker. It's held by the title company, so don't worry about this. This paragraph basically says, in so many words, that you are going to get title to your house by way of a document called a deed, and then it just outlines here everything that's in it. Go ahead and initial here and here. Okay, this paragraph is important. This talks about the condition of the property and how you get the property when we go to settlement. So first of all, the condition of property, everything you can see here, the property is sold as is. That means when we do a home inspection, anything that we ask for is all negotiable. A long time ago, it used to be if there were any structural or mechanical problems, plumbing, electrical, heating and air conditioning, the seller had to fix it. Not anymore. It's all negotiable. So that's part one of this paragraph. Part two says that when we get the home at settlement, it has to be vacant, clear of trash and debris, broom swept clean, and in the same condition that it was on the date we have a accepted contract. Why is that important? Because when we go and do our final walkthrough the day of settlement, there needs to be no holes in the wall from the movers. They're not allowed to leave trash there, etc. So this is your protection that the home you buy is the same one you're getting. Adjustments, this talks about different prorations that's going to happen at settlement, and the title company is going to go over that with you. You can read that if you want. This talks about closing costs and outlines different potential closing costs. You can read through that. Again, the lender and the title company will go over that with you in more detail. We sort of touched on this, transfer and recordation fees. In the state of Maryland, there are three, in Montgomery County, there are three transfer and recordation fees that are paid. There's a state transfer tax, a state recordation tax, and then there's the local transfer tax. If you are a first-time buyer of these three, you will get out of paying the state transfer tax, and that's going to save you 0.25% right there, okay? If you're not a first-time buyer, then we just split these 50-50 like we normally do with the seller. Broker liability, we sort of went into this in the buyer agency agreement. This just says what the RE/MAX and myself as their agent are liable for. Broker fee, that gets collected, the commission that gets at settlement. Seller responsibility, this is just letting the seller know they need to keep their home current on the mortgage. They can't go into default, things like that. Your responsibility is financially to keep yourself going along the line of being able to get the loan and move forward on this, and you're always going to be upfront and truthful about your financial abilities here. So go ahead and initial there. If there's an HOA, we're going to get the HOA documents. So we talked about that earlier. Ground rent does not apply here because we're not in Baltimore. Now this paragraph 32 is if they're buying this property contingent on selling their own property. So let's just say they're not. Okay, so here, if you're, this says that this home is not contingent on you selling your house. This paragraph says if the seller has any renters in there, they cannot extend the lease beyond when you take over. The next paragraphs talk about defaulting and mediation and all that. You can read that on your own. Go ahead and initial here and here. Same thing, attorney's fees. That's a continuation of this, so that's stuff you can read on your own. In the state of Maryland, you have a right to select a title company to do the settlement. In our case, we're choosing Home First, if that's okay with you. Title insurance, you're going to have to get title insurance when you buy a home. The title settlement company will explain that to you in more detail. Um, this is authorization to give the title company the disclosures that they're going to need to settle the case, to settle the house. Again, the title company is going to go into that detail. If we do get a home warranty, make sure you know what it covers. Um, Homeowners insurance, there's a brochure available online through the Maryland Association of Realtors, which talks about homeowners insurance. You can go grab that if you want. Go ahead and initial here and here, and then we'll go into the flood insurance. When you do homeowners insurance, we need to make sure to know whether or not you're in a floodplain. There's a couple of websites here that you can go to see if you're on it. I can tell you the FEMA maps change all the time. My best advice to you is call your homeowners insurance person and ask them. Guarantee fund is something Maryland offers where if you are wronged by an agent, you can collect up to $50,000 from the state. The disclosures, we talked about that. Sellers have to provide us a disclaimer statement, and we talked a little bit about that earlier. If a Maryland seller is not a resident seller, then they have to fill out a form where they're going to get nailed for 7.5%. That's something that's on them. IRS always wants to know when there's buying and selling going on. There are IRS documents that you're going to fill out at settlement. One of them is going to be the right for the lender to access your tax returns if they need to do an audit. Don't worry about this. We're not in the Chesapeake or Atlantic coastal ways here. We're not in wetlands. We don't have a forest conservation easement, so go ahead and initial there. Again, no conservation easement. This says you guys are not for tax purposes. You guys are not foreign investors. Criminal activity, sexual offenders. You guys are going to need to do your own due diligence here. I'm not allowed to talk about this. Does not apply to Montgomery County. We're not near a military installation. This is all legal stuff you can read on your own. Initial here and here. We talked about you guys having the right to appeal the property taxes. Just be careful when you do it because you might think you're trying to save money. And I've seen the county come back and go, oh, we're not assessing you enough. And they'll try to hit you for more. You can't assign this contract to anybody. This is all legal stuff here. Go ahead and sign here and here. All right, now we'll get into the addendum. Okay, this is the addendum of clauses, and 9 times out of 10, we're only filling out a couple of these things. Okay, so if somebody's asking for closing costs, this is where you're going to write that. Okay, so if we're asking for closing costs, we're asking them for 3% of the sale price, initial here and here. Home inspection. We're going to do our home inspection within 10 days of the acceptance of the contract, and we're going to ask them we have a right to negotiate and ask for repairs. We also have the right to walk away. We're going to ask for both of those. Radon, if the buyers are going to do radon, which I highly recommend, we're going to do radon in 14 days to do the radon inspection. If it comes back high, we can have them, our 2 options are number 1, ask them to fix it. Number 2, we can walk away from the contract. We're going to ask for 21 days to do the appraisal. You know, you're going to have them initialing on all these things here. We are not using this with FHA or VA. The FHA and VA have separate financing addenda, and they have their own appraisal contingency built in. The only time we're using this is with a conventional loan, or if somebody's a cash buyer and for some unknown reason they want to do an appraisal. But just for right now, it's going to be with conventional loans. All right, so let's say it's the conventional loans. All right, so here's the appraisal contingency. We're going to ask for 21 days to do the appraisal. If the appraisal comes in at or above asking price, we're going to move on. If the appraisal comes in low, then we're going to ask them here. These are the options here. We can ask them to lower the price. We can accept the lower price and move on, and we pay the difference. And then if we ask them to lower the price and they don't want to do it, we can void the contract. Okay. So some of these things here, and I'll just go through them real quick. This is agent checking septic. I normally don't use this. Private well and septic. If you buy a home that's well and septic, then we're going to have to do a well and septic inspection, and you will check this off, and the buyer is going to do the well and septic inspection. Post-settlement occupancy, that's if there's a rent back. So if you have a rent back, you're going to fill this out. How long the buyer is going to, this happens when a seller wants to stay in the property after the contract is closed or settlement. So what'll happen is, let's say they can only do it. The lenders will not allow it for more than 60 days, because once you pass 60 days, it becomes subject to landlord tenant, and that's a real problem. So let's say it's 30 days. So we would put the parties agree the sellers occupy for a period of 30 days. Now, how much do you charge them? I put PITI, principal, interest, taxes, and insurance divided by 30. PITI divided by 30 per day. So what does that say? We're going to take your monthly mortgage payment, we're going to divide it by 30, and that's your per day charge. And a security deposit of, it's usually somewhere 500 or $1,000. Okay, so that's how you fill one of these things out. Don't worry about this unless you're doing a deal on behalf of somebody you're related to. And then this is any other provisions here, and then just sign here and here. Addendum clauses B, again, rarely use that. The only time I'll use this is if we're buying a home on behalf of our buyer, and the buyer has to buy their home contingent on selling theirs. This is where you would fill that out. And this is something, if it comes up, we can go over this. There's also settlement, the settlement contingency. If the buyer has to buy a property contingent on them selling their home, they already have a contract on their home, and it's past the contingencies, and all we're waiting on is for their home to settle, then this is what you would use. Backup, contingent on purchasing another home. I mean, these are all things that, if they want to do a lead paint inspection, these are all different things that are just rarely used. So we'll just use that case by case basis. You can just come to me and I can go over that with you. Jurisdictional addendum. This gives the right for the buyer. Okay, Mr. Doe. This gives you guys the right to go examine the master plan, because you want to make sure that nothing's going to be built or anything's going on in the master plan that's going to interfere with your property. Why is that important? A bunch of years ago, when they were planning on building Maryland, the Route 200, the intercounty connector, nobody knew where it was going. So that would have been a good place to check the master plan. If you're buying in Rockville along Randolph Road, they're planning on building an extension to the Montrose Parkway. You would want to check and make sure and see where it's going. So go ahead and sign here and here. Now, if it's in the city of Rockville, they sign here and here. Settlement agent. So we're going to have Home First Title do the settlement. If they're a first-time buyer, you guys are a first-time buyer. So this explains that you are, you're not a first-time buyer. Transfer and recordation fees are going to be split equally between buyers and sellers. If they are a first-time buyer, okay, we talked about this earlier. You're going to get out of, you're going to save 0.25%. You're getting out of the state transfer tax. And then the rest of it's going to be just like here, split equally between buyers and sellers. That goes right here. Always split equally between buyers and sellers. Only time that doesn't happen is if you're buying new construction where the buyer pays for it all, or a foreclosure where the buyer pays for it all. Property maintenance and condition. We want to make sure that when we get the home at settlement, it looks the same as it did at the home inspection. Why do we do this? Because the date of offer, there's nothing in writing to say what the home looked like. But as of the home inspection, we have in writing what the home looked like at that time. Home warranty, if the buyer wants to ask for that, we would put it here. Private well and septic. If it is on well and septic, you would put yes, and then we do the well and septic inspection. If it's not, you'd put no. The rest of this is legal stuff. Void contract. This I do talk to the buyers about. John and Jane, this talks about void contracts. So, and this links up with your earnest money. So when is a contract void? We can void the contract if we walk away on any of the contingencies: inspection, appraisal, radon, homeowner or condo association document review, or financing contingency. If any of these don't work, we can't work any of these out, we can void the contract and you get your earnest money back. But please understand that you don't automatically get your earnest money back. As it says here, there has to be a release signed to get the earnest money back, and both sides have to sign it. If it's done during the contingencies, sellers really don't have a leg to stand on. It's not a problem. If you're a week away from contract settling, you're probably gonna have a big problem trying to get this back, because you can't void the contract. Homeowners insurance, we talked about that. This talks about this really has to do more with a co-op than a condo association. I've never seen this, but sometimes with co-ops, you have to go through an approval process where they have to review your application That talks about it. Um, Again, seller says he's not in default. More legal stuff here for you to review when you have a chance. Go ahead and sign here and here. Okay, so now we're going to get into the financing addendum, and there's three of them. There's the FHA, there's the VA, and then there's the conventional. So FHA, the top part of all three of them are the same. The buyer is going to obtain, usually I have yet to assume one of these, obtain a mortgage over, let's say, with FHA, it's going to be, the loan's going to be 96.5% of the sales price because they normally put 3.5% down, amortized over 30 years, which is the majority of the time what's going to happen, at a fixed rate. Sometimes they do an ARM, but again, rare. Fixed rate. And then the interest rate, we don't know. I just put TBD or MKT for market rate because we don't know. Contract is contingent on 9 p.m. and then you would fill in however many days of the with the financing contingency. So if it's a 30-day contingency, it's contingent until 30 days after ratification. Where's the appraisal? Here's the appraisal contingency. So this is why we don't have to do it in the addendum clauses. So FHA says that the appraisals, it has to appraise for 269.9. If not, then we're going to ask them to lower the price. If they don't lower the price, you can walk away or pay the difference. And that's outlined. This is the exact same language, by the way, that's in the addendum clauses. What happens in the event of a low appraisal? Total amount of lender charges cannot, by law, regulation charge the buyer. Okay, so this just talks, and I've never seen this happen, that any charges that are not allowed to be charged to the buyer are paid by the seller. I've never seen this. I honestly don't know what that is, but they can read that. Termite inspection. Now with FHA, this is important. Fences and sheds, let's an outbuilding, anything like that are going to be included. So when you do an FHA, if somebody's got a shed that's falling apart, FHA is going to flag that. Conventional won't. Lender required repairs, if the FHA goes in and let's say they see a shed that's fallen apart and they say fix it, if the seller doesn't fix it, then you can't get the loan and you're out of the deal on the financing contingency. There is a document, which is, I'll show you later on in here, for your protection, get a home inspection. You give that to them and have them initial it. Conventional financing addendum, same thing. They're going to fill this part out. You are going to, this part's going to be taken off their pre-approval letter. Just copy down what the lender's doing, how much they're going to be financing over how many years, if it's fixed or adjustable, and interest rate. Financing continues, same thing. How many days after ratification? The difference here is that the appraisal contingency is not written into this. Everything else is the same. VA is going to be similar to FHA. Again, this is the same. This is the same. VA notice of value. This, again, that's the appraisal. Seller loan charges. This is the same. This is this. It's all the same. Here's the, for your inspection, get a home protection. Jane and John Doe, please initial here. I'm telling you that you guys should get an inspection. This document is normally included with the disclosures, but sometimes it's not. So let's say that it's not. I would give this to them and say, this is 2 pages saying that you have a right to get all the disclosures from the seller. If you do not get the disclosures from the seller, and I'm sorry, this says that they're supposed to get the disclosures from the seller at the time they write the contract. If they do not get these disclosures at the time of the contract and they get them after we've written the contract, they have 5 days to review them. And if they don't like what's in there, they can kill the deal. So I have them initial here and then sign here and here. Don't worry about this. That's for CU deals. We'll go over that later. Actually, we don't have to use these anymore because the only time you use this, you don't have to use this with Montgomery County because it's already in the jurisdictional addendum. So I'll show you right here. Everything that's in the addendum, in that first time buyer addendum, is right here. So, but I'll show it to you anyway because in case you have to use this in another deal that's not Montgomery County. By the way, this is just for CU Realty. If we get a CU Realty deal, the admin will fill all this stuff out. This talks about their rebate for the credit union. So this, again, this is first time buyer. It states that You get out of the state transfer tax, which will result in a 2.25% savings. So you will have them initial buyer and seller to initial one. So how is it split? Again, unless there's some other deal worked out or it's new construction and a foreclosure, we're going to fill in to be split 50-50 between buyers and sellers, have buyers initial here, and then the sellers are going to initial here and then sign there and there. And